The scent of old paper, lavender, and dust was the smell of Elara's childhood. She stood in the doorway of her mother's sewing room, a space that had always been more sanctuary than studio. Her mother, Maeve, was a silhouette against the large window, her silver hair a halo in the late afternoon sun. In her hands was the unfinished quilt, a mosaic of fabric scraps from decades of their lives, a swatch from Elara's first day of school dress, a piece from her father's favorite work shirt, the floral pattern from the curtains of their old kitchen. "You're still working on that?" Elara asked, her voice softer than she intended. Maeve didn't look up, her fingers deftly guiding a needle through the layers. "A thing isn't finished until it's finished, darling," it was her standard reply, one Elara had heard for 20 years. Elara had returned to her hometown not for a visit, but for a stay. A promotion she didn't get, a relationship that had quietly fizzled out. The city that had once promised everything now felt hollow. She felt unraveled, a thread pulled loose from her own tapestry, and she had, almost instinctively, returned to the source. She watched her mother. This strong, quiet woman who spoke more through the push and pull of the needle than with words. They had always had a loving but distant relationship, built on practicalities, home-cooked meals, mended clothes, advice on mortgages, but never on the messy, emotional truths that Elara kept locked inside. Maeve was a fortress of quiet competence, and Elara had never learned how to scale the walls. Days settled into a new, fragile rhythm. Elara worked remotely from the old dining table, while Maeve puttered in her garden, and in her sewing room. The quilt grew slowly, a new patch appearing every few days. Elara started to recognize them. The gingham from the apron. She'd baked cookies in with her grandmother. The deep blue corduroy from a pair of pants her brother wore until they were threadbare. One evening, frustration boiled over. Elara spilled a glass of wine on her laptop, a final, ridiculous straw on the back of her professional failures. She slammed her hand on the table, tears of self-pity welling in her eyes. Maeve walked in, took in the scene, and left without a word. She returned with a clean cloth and a bowl of cold water. She didn't offer empty platitudes or try to fix it. She simply started dabbing at the keyboard, her movements calm and precise. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore, Mom," Elara whispered, the admission tearing out of her. "I feel so lost." Maeve paused her cleaning. She looked at her daughter, really looked at her, and for the first time, Elara saw not a fortress, but a woman with her own map of sorrows. "I know the feeling," Maeve said, her voice low. "When your father died, I felt like the whole pattern of my life had been cut up into pieces I could never put back together." It was the first time she had spoken of his death so directly. They sat in silence for a moment, the unspoken grief a third presence in the room. The next day, Maeve gestured to the chair beside her sewing machine. "You used to be good at this." Steady hands. Tentatively, Elara sat. Maeve showed her how to knot the thread, how to make small, even stitches. As Elara's clumsy needle pierced the fabric, joining a new patch, a buttery yellow from a sundress she'd loved as a teen, the stories began to trickle out. Maeve told her about choosing that yellow fabric, hoping it would cheer her up after a bad breakup at 16. She pointed to a dark green wool and recalled the coat Elara's father was wearing when they first met. With every stitch, a memory was woven back into place. Elara shared her own stories, not just the successes she'd always reported, but the failures, the fears, the loneliness she'd hidden in her big, city life. They weren't just sewing pieces of cloth. They were stitching together their separate histories into a single, shared narrative. The Sirs, the final evening came before Elara's return to the city. The quilt was finished. It was imperfect, with some of Elara's stitches too large and others crooked, but it was whole. They spread it out on the living room floor, a vibrant, heavy map of their family's joy and resilience. Elara ran her fingers over a patch of faded denim from her father's jeans. "It's beautiful, Mom." "It's ours," Maeve corrected, placing a hand on Elara's. "A thing isn't finished until it's finished. And sometimes, you're not the one who's supposed to finish it alone." Elara looked at her mother, truly seeing the woman who had silently been her anchor all along. The fortress had a door, and it had been open all this time. Elara just hadn't known how to knock. She packed the quilt in her suitcase, not as a keepsake, but as a shield. She was returning to the city with the same job, and the same apartment, but she was no longer the same woman. She was no longer a loose thread, but an integral part of a larger, stronger design. As her train pulled away from the station, she watched her mother's figure grow smaller on the platform, a steady, unwavering point on the horizon. Elara knew. Then that family wasn't just where you came from. It was the fabric you chose to carry with you. The pattern of love and history that could keep you warm, reminding you that even when you felt alone, you were forever a part of something whole, something finished, and something endlessly beautiful.